If you'd like to kick off, and then after we hear from our wonderful co-sponsors, we have some folks who have benefited from this type of leave.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. I'm Senator Antonio Hayes. I'm pleased to reintroduce the Time to Care Act because I believe that almost all Marylanders, whatever the circumstances, will at some point in their lives need extended leave away from work to provide necessary care for family members or themselves. They may be welcoming a new baby or a newly adopted child, or they may be trying to support an aging parent or another loved one with serious health needs or a disability. Maybe they're dealing with challenges of a military family member being deployed overseas or returning with a dramatic injury. This is real life, and we all go through these things. The problem is not that we don't recognize the need for family and medical leave. The Federal Family and Medical Leave Act was passed 26 years ago and established a right for many employees to take away time from work to provide for this kind of care. This legislation does not invent a new category for leave. It just creates a funding mechanism to provide partial wage replacement to allow people to make ends meet up to 12 weeks. The United States is one of 2 or 3 last countries in the world, one of 2 or 3 last countries in the world that fails to provide some form of financial support during family and medical leave. This forces far too many of our citizens, especially those of us living paycheck to paycheck, to have to choose between economic security and caring for our families in times of need. Only 17% of U.S. workers have access to paid family leave, and that can create real hardship. Nearly 25% of American women take 10 or fewer days of maternity leave, putting them and their children at risk physically and emotionally. There are tens of millions of unpaid family caregivers struggling to balance or having to choose between their work obligations and their caregiving responsibilities. And the situation grows more challenging as the number of older Americans keep growing. I had the fortune of growing up in Baltimore City when my mom couldn't take care of, was struggling with substance abuse and other things. I had a grandmother who was strong as the Rock of Gibraltar, who stepped in at a critical time in my life and helped raise me. Now, fast forward to current day, myself and other relatives are taking care of her needs as she struggled with Alzheimer's. And so this is a really important piece of legislation for many families throughout Maryland who have the awesome responsibility of being caregivers for loved ones who shepherd them along the way. And so it gives me great joy to be here with my colleagues like Senator Elfridge here in the Senate, Delegate Valderrama, and Delegate Kelly, who's carried this burden and been a huge proponent for this piece of legislation for greater than a decade. And so thank you all for being here with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Good afternoon. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Valderrama. I'm a Maryland State Delegate representing Prince George's County. I definitely don't want to be repetitive, but I definitely want to start off by giving kudos to Delegate Kelly, who he mentioned has been working with this for over a decade. It is my proud honor to be lead sponsor on the bill, but I definitely give credit where credit is due. It is a measure that I have supported over the years with Delegate Kelly, but to be the lead sponsor, I share this with her. Having said that, Senator Hayes mentioned the 17% of U.S. workers who have paid family leave. I can tell you, as a mother of 2 young children, at a former job that I have, the place need not be named, but where I used to work, when my mother was still alive, I had the fortune of having my mother take care of my children. Excuse me. That I had the fortune of having my mother care for my children. Not many families in Maryland have that fortune. So I'm very gracious for that, and it is why I'm a proud supporter of this. Please don't let the tears fool you. I'm a strong woman.
It's okay. It's okay.
We know.
Strong woman with a heart. So I think that's the important thing to say here. So I mentioned that because my mother, we mentioned this leave. After my mother cared for my children, as years progressed, my parents are elderly now. My mother is no longer with us, but when I was at my former employer, I had to use all my sick leave. Now everyone says, what is the purpose of this bill? Because we have sick leave, we have vacation. We don't want to use our sick leave and vacation for family leave. Just to reiterate, for a newborn, an adoptee, to care for yourself, to care for a family member like my mother, who was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's. And which is why I support this measure wholeheartedly. Had no idea that my colleague was going through the same thing. You only hear about it in the end. But as representatives of this state, it goes to show you we're all human, we all have the same needs. And so while we put this measure forward, it is with a personal heart that I put this through, because I have to tell you, at my former employer, I got a lot of, I don't know what the appropriate word is for the press, crap. For taking off as much as I did. And I had to talk to my director, who was on a mission to find out why he was finding something, like I was just playing hooky or whatever the case. And so I finally told him, I said, I'm caring for my mother. If my father needs me, I'm going to do it. If there's an issue, please let me know. And he left it alone, but it wasn't a good time, let me just say. So I left that employer at some point in time. But again, I just mentioned this because, again, without being repetitive and having the water networks keep going on here, just want to emphasize how important this measure is. We all need one another, and we need to be there for our families. And with that, I just commend all my colleagues here for being here to support this measure.
So I'll speak next. I think you can tell by her powerful words what an incredible advocate Delegate Valderrama is going to be for this bill, as well as Senator Hayes has been, and Senator Elfreth has been. I want to make a couple of points. My name is Delegate Ariana Kelly. I represent Montgomery County, District 16. And I originally started working with this bill about 8 years ago. This has been a long slog. And what you've heard from my colleagues is this is the kind of legislation that is incredibly personal for so many of us. Like Delegate Valderrama, I was first elected when I had toddlers. And I started thinking about this from the perspective of maternity and paternity leave. And now, 10 years later, I'm thinking about this from the perspective of the child of a parent with dementia. Everybody can use a program like this, and it's intended to benefit everybody with all of our different family situations. And it's also intended to help small business employers and employees across the board, and employers across the board. It's the kind of program that can raise all boats and help everyone. The reason I'm confident in this is because we have seen tremendous momentum on this issue during the years I have been working on this. When I first put in this bill, 3 states had programs like this. Now 9 states and the District of Columbia have programs like this. It's because these programs work and they help people, and it's the type of program that everyone can benefit from, and it solves, to the point Senator Hayes made, it solves a problem we have with our economy. So I'm so honored that Delegate Valderrama and Senator Hayes and Senator Elfreth and so many of our other colleagues have taken this on as something that they're willing to lead on. We have broadened our coalition. We represent all the areas of the state. We represent people at different stages of their life doing different types of caregiving and having their own illnesses and new parenting to deal with. And it's not just the legislative coalition that has grown, it is the advocacy coalition that has grown. I am so proud of the network of partners standing behind us who are all in this for the same reason, to get this done for the people of Maryland. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank Senator Elfreth, who is going to speak next, for taking a leadership role on this as well.
Well, hello everybody, my name is Senator Sarah Elfreth. I represent I represent District 30 here in Anne Arundel County, so the capital city. Welcome to District 30. And as the resident millennial on this group and in the Senate, I can say that this is really about economic competitiveness. I've knocked on quite a few thousand doors in our campaign, talking to people from every demographic in my district, and paid family leave, childcare issues, being able to raise a family in this new normal of two-income households was such a prominent issue for my constituents, and asking for a little bit of help to help balance those family issues. And I think this is the right approach at the right time. It represents a wonderful balance between employer and employee, and ultimately it's going to make Maryland more competitive when it comes to attracting the best and brightest to want to work here. So I'm just so thrilled to stand with my colleagues and our coalition today, and just ask that folks out in the community come and advocate for your families and your priorities. Thank you.
So I'm co-producing for Ms. Warner here. We're going to shift over a little bit because I think there's some real life stories from folks that aren't legislators